right, so welcome everyone. Super glad to see you and glad that you've joined us today. A couple of notes before we get started. This session is being recorded, so if you need to step away for any reason today for your self-care or for your schedule, please feel free to do that. The recording will be available later today that you can go back and view. Those who are attending today, you are not able to share your camera or your audio, and that is just for your privacy. So we can't see you or hear you, but please do feel free to type a question or a comment into the chat at the bottom of your screen. When you do that, you have the option of making that question or comment viewable to everyone or just to the host and the presenters. So keep that in mind. And one last quick note, I have to give a shout out to our funders, the Office of Victims of Crime, for providing funding to all of Survivor Space, including our survivor circles. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to these amazing people for what promises to be a wonderful, engaging discussion. And I, for one, cannot wait. I am so pleased to welcome T. Ortiz and Kristina Fitz today. So welcome to you both. T, I will turn it over to you to get us started.
Thank you so much, Becky. I'm really excited for us to be here today. Thank you all for your patience and your time. 1 second, I'm trying to remember how to do this share your screen thing. There we go. Sorry, I'm all the way at the end, of course. You know, that's how life is. View slideshow. There we go. All right. As long as you can still see me as well, I think we're all in. Can you see this the slideshow? And you
Yes,
can
you're
see
all good.
me?
Yes, you're
Awesome.
great.
Okay. It's kind of, oh, there it is. Okay, it's a little delayed for me. Okay, cool. So today's conversation, we're here to have it just a straightforward topical conversations about survivors hypervigilance, protecting your children when you weren't protecting yourself. On this Friday today, we want to first and foremost, obviously, just like Becky did, give our shout outs and our heads up to our funding and acknowledge that Survivor Space was produced by Zero Abuse Project under the grant for OVC, Office of Justice Programs, and the U.S. Department of Justice. So none of the findings, none of the expressions, none of these opinions are those of them. They just are solely of me and Kristina. But we're here to have a real acknowledgement and a real conversation. And I can't say enough. I've been doing this work specifically around expressing my story in very intentional ways, specifically in the works to help other victims who have been traumatized from child sex abuse, sex trafficking, and other forms of exploitation. And I have never in my life had an opportunity that was so organic, so real, that allowed me to really be innovative, have conversations that were vital and important to me. And so I'm just really thankful to this opportunity to bring these perspectives, to bring this conversation. I also want to be real and acknowledge that because of that, because I'm able to do work that's organically from my heart, that are conversations that I think are passionate, that are important for people who have had these experiences, who have grown to be adults who've had these experiences. I also want to just give kind of like, I guess, an emotional trigger warning for me. There's very few times in my life that I have work that I feel that could provoke emotion in the capacity in which I could possibly shed a tear or like have some, emotional response. So I will say that this conversation may provoke that. Don't be alarmed. I am aware of that. I am okay and accepting of that. I mean, it's a part of my healing process. And so please don't at all be opposed to taking any time for yourself that you need to. Self-care is important. So that's really important for us. So who are we? For me, I know you guys probably upon registration, you're able to see who I was as far as professionally, kind of the work that I've been able to contribute to. And that's all an amazing. But as I stated in the description, just giving some foundational background, my first documented child sex abuse was at 1 month old. So, that really gives you context to how long and prolonged this abuse has been occurring to me, how long it's been a part of my life, how it's been a lifelong process of healing. Um, and just a reminder that unfortunately, I am not the only person that's been victimized in such a way throughout their life at different periods of their life as a child. Um, and that child sex abuse really, it does not discriminate on age. And so that's why we should not discriminate on our efforts to seek healing. We should not discriminate on our efforts to do the best foot forward that we can to be better people and contributors and better parents, which is the conversation that we're here today. So, again, I'm just really excited to be here. I hail from Oakland, California. So, shout out to Cali. I currently live in Hawaii. I went and got my degree in strategic communications at my HBCU at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland. So I've been able to be a little bit of all over the place. And things that are important to me are first and foremost my parenting, being an intentional parent. Another thing that's important to me is my healing. After everything that's happened to me, I have a responsibility to my healing. Um, and lastly, being connected with people and with nature in ways that I didn't have the opportunity growing up. And so those are things that are important to me, separate from all the things that was shared with you in my bio. And I would love to, have the honor to express how much gratitude I have to share the stage today with Miss Kristina Fitz. I've known her for numerous years doing the work specifically around child sex trafficking and us both having that similar lived experience. And this woman is a powerhouse. She has so much dynamic information to share. She has so many concepts and ideologies that continues to spark me every time I speak to her and talk to her. So I am so excited to bring you all today Miss Kristina Fitz, and I will allow you to introduce yourself as you justly should.
Oh, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Kristina Fitz. I'm from Los Angeles, California, specifically Inglewood. I am a lived experience expert here in LA County. And what makes this topic really important is for me is because I have a child by my trafficker. And so it's just an issue that has been rooted in my spirit to just talk about. And so I'm just really grateful to have the opportunity to have this platform to have this conversation, with my survivor sister T. I too went to college. I have a bachelor's degree in sociology from Cal State Dominguez Hills, and I have an AA degree in communications. Um, and some things that are really important to me is giving back to my community, parenting my kid to the highest standard that I possibly can, and continuously growing and working on myself. And the last thing I would like to say is being a helping professional and being in the position to inform and inspire, and to take time to help others when no one else has the capacity to help them. So that's just a little bit about me.
Thank you, Kristina. God, I love
Yeah.
you so much. So this is a quote that was shared from the Trauma Research Foundation that talks about, I'll just read it. We know that childhood trauma has long-term impact. It rearranges the brain, lowers self-esteem, complicates relationships, and resides in the body. So basically, it's basically the things that we already know, right? I'm preaching to the choir when we have this conversation. As I said, this whole platform is for survivors, by survivors. So we know the firsthand experiences of how this has, really had negative implications in our lives. And so as we understand this, that's why we're coming to the forefront of this conversation. It also sparks a loving, I mean, if anybody has ever heard me speak, I love this quote. And it says, the test of first rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still have the ability to function. One should, for example, see things as hopeless and yet be determined to make them otherwise. That is by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And it really, really speaks to just how we know this part. We know what it does. We know the negative impact. But by being intentional about our work, by really coming into a space of accepting our healing, by making sure that we are bringing spaces of love and empathy, we can do the opposite of this. So our objectives today are basically very simple, but to empathize in the duality of the experience of being a survivor of child sexual abuse and being a parent, to bring awareness to common experiences, thoughts, insecurities, and values.
To support themes that are relevant to parenting intentionally and with comprehension of our experiences as they may differ from our children's, and to be real.
So, protective factors following childhood adversity can be considered within the wider domain of resilience. And I love this quote because it really emphasizes the fact that it's a resiliency form that we, as survivors and people who have come through certain adversities, we do have protective factors and we do have protective reactions. And I think that that's something that we really want to highlight here as we have this conversation, specifically because some of the myths presiding, and they're not so good myths, around those of us who've had this experience.
Mm-hmm. Exploring protective instincts, right? So we all as parents, like it comes on, like we want to just protect our child. We all have our own inner fears and things that have happened within ourselves, whether we were molested or we were abused. And then sometimes we internalize that. And so we reflect our own traumas into our children. And so for a person who like had a baby by a trafficker and like actually giving birth when I was in the life, like coming from doing a job and then the next morning having a baby, like all these red flags start popping up in your head. And especially when you come from this state of mind, or like at one point in time, there was like always this um cycle of like my child's gonna be next. So because her mama's a hoe, excuse my language, and her daddy's a pimp, then now I'm breeding the next generation, right? So like when most women have children and they're able to enjoy some of the beautiful things of being pregnant, having a baby shower and all these other things, we're in survival. Well, at least for me, I was in survival mode. Like, how do I protect this kid? Like, I don't even have a place for her to go when she comes. You know what I'm saying? I'm still working, trying to figure it out, you know? And I don't think that I had the capacity or even the time to even really process what was going on. I didn't have the time to really think about like safety issues, or like what kind of safety I would be putting my child in when she was born. I didn't even think about like, what if the system got involved in this child's life? Because we see now, and like, to put context on it, my kid is 14. So like back then it would have been even worse because we didn't have all these laws and things in place and all these organizations that like are here to help survivors. You know what I'm saying? We were still criminalized at that time. And so my child could have been involved in the foster care system and taken away from me, all because what I thought was me protecting her, I wasn't protecting her. What I thought was my inner instincts kicking in and me having this child, and I was going to be able to provide for her and give her this best life, or a happy home, from a a person that is in the life and like living the fantasy, you think like, oh, this is possible. But like when you actually take yourself out of that situation and you look back and you think about, wow, was I really being a protective person? And I don't think in that context that I was actually like, I couldn't protect somebody if I didn't know how to protect myself. And if I don't know what protection looks like, then how am I going to be able to be a protector to this little person that's coming into the world? Also,
That
too, and then also too, like there's this concept of like, I had a baby, but I was also like, oh my gosh, I was like shocked, like I really had a person. And then the shockness came in of like, this is like not a toy, this is not a dog, this is not like a cat, this is like a human, and I'm responsible for it. And then it came in like, oh shit, shoot, I can't mess this up, because like anything I do, I can go to jail because I didn't do right, but I don't know how to do right. So now I'm like in a catch 22 when I'm trying to figure out me, plus I'm in the life, plus now I have a baby and I don't have the skill sets to take care of the baby or know how to take care of the baby. So it just was really complicated at the time. And so I think that sometimes like we want to have these protective factors and like we have it in us, but in the same token, if no one teaches you or shows you or even like tells you like that protective factor may not be a protective factor, then how are you going to know? And so I think that is like what was wrong with my situation, is that a lot of things I didn't know better, but I knew better. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. And like, I think like a lot of stuff that you talked about specifically for me, I feel like, so even though our situations were different, right? Like, so for me, I was in my 30s when I had a baby, right? And I was married, and I was married to a man in the military, and it was supposed to be like, what people thought was sunshine and rainbows, but it wasn't, you know what I mean? And so for me, I ended up experiencing a lot of, domestic violence and intimate partner violence. And then I instantly had the want and response to protect, right? Because for me, let's just be honest, like growing up, I was like, I don't ever, and this is a lot, right? Like, cause I'm feeling really emotional sharing this, right? So for me, it was like, because of everything I went through, I didn't ever want to have my child experience like none of those ACEs, right? Like we all know and heard about the ACEs, right? Adverse childhood experiences, right? And divorce is one of them, and all these other things, and then like intimate violence and yelling and like all this other stuff. And it was like really emotional for me to admit that like my child had experienced these things, right? And so it was like, it was a lot for me. And it, like, before I even had my child, I had already wanted to protect my child, right? I had all these things of like, and specifically around like, because I went through childhood sexual abuse, right? I was like, I don't want anybody just, watching my baby. I don't want just like all these things happening to my child. So there was all these things that I wanted to protect him from before. Then I had him, and then all these experiences happened to me, right? And I was like hyper vigilant about it. And so there were all these fears also because I come from the foster care system, because I've had these experiences, where I, I I realized that there was not only the fear of what was happening of in regards to how it could evolve to the ACEs of possibly my child being victimized in other ways, right? Because as a single mom, people don't talk about that, right? As single parents, that goes for men too. As single parents, you need more help. You need more assistance. You're juggling a whole bunch of things. So there was these ideologies of like, before I had the baby, I wanted to protect him. Then I had the baby and all these things happened. I wanted to protect him. How do I do those? Then I have the fear of I've been system involved. My baby's going to be taken away, just like you said, right? Like all these different things. And I feel like all of that, like, it made me struggle with, and it still to this day affects my ability to deal with the fact that I feel like my child is ever safe in this world, right? Like I didn't already have it growing up that the things happened to me, right? That I didn't already, go through things with his father. You know what I mean? But then, going through experiences where, we understand, those of us who've been victimized in certain ways, we are more likely, we talk about ourselves, like the self-esteem and the real issues that complicate our lives, right? So for me, it was a struggle of, you know, understanding that there were instincts that were protective. I had protective factors about myself. Like I know one thing. One thing that's very clear about me as a mama bear is you're gonna have to kill me before you get to my baby. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I feel that as far as the confusion, um, and trying to explore that and try to understand that the difference between like the provocation of the triggers of the protective and the reactions, and also like those instincts of like, man, I'm mama bear and you're gonna have to fight me. Like I know you, like your baby, what, how old? And you told me the other day you were like, she ain't no baby no more, but
She's not a baby no more. But I had a period, so like I had a village. So like I was, when I had my baby, when I got pregnant, I got pregnant by the trafficker. I was in the life, whatever. Literally, went from that to having a baby, but my baby was born premature. So she was born 6 months on the dot. So she stayed in the hospital for like 5 months. So there was a 5-month period to where I really, like, when you're supposed to be like building that bond and like, having that motherly instinct kicked in, that never kicked in for me, right? Because I wasn't there. I had to get back to work and I was there, right? And then also I was trying to chase like this happy fantasy, like we're gonna be a family, this is what we need to do type thing. So I was like listening to this person, thinking that he had the best interest and that he was gonna be our protector, right? um and then when my daughter got released from the hospital, and thank God that I have, and not everybody has this. And so that's why, if you can create a village in whichever way you can, no matter if it's like supportive coworkers, survivor sisters or brothers, whoever your village is imperative to have one, because that's one thing I think that made a difference in my child and in her development, is that I had a really good, strong village. Like my mom stepped in. She went and got guardianship over my baby because, I was tripping, and they like really protected the child from me because I was the danger at the time. I tried to come home and take my kid, and, my mom had to call 911 on me and get me arrested because I was going to take her into an unsafe environment. And sometimes you need strong people who have love for you, but they want the best for you. And the only way that they can have that best for you is through that tough love to take away till you get yourself together. Because like I said, things could have went bad. And so because my mom and my grandmother showed up to the hospital and was making up all these lies and stories, no one called social services, never called DCFS from that hospital. You know what I'm saying? Because my mother was smart. When I tried to take my baby the first time, she like, no, you ain't doing that. I'm calling the police and kicking you and him out and whatever. She set up those safeguards to protect the child and to semi kind of protect me until I was ready to come home, which is very critical in this situation, because at the end of the day, I'm an adult, but this child is a vulnerable child. She's sick. She just came, not fully developed. Like, it's a lot going on. Like, you can't have her in and out of hotels, things like that. And as an adult, you want to protect your child because you're like, yeah, I had her. She's mine. I know what I'm doing. But in actuality, I really didn't know what I was doing. And so I think that was the best thing that my village could have done for me, was to raise my child. And then my kid was raised like with my mom and my stepdad. So she had like a mommy and a daddy where she could be like mom and dad. And I wasn't mom and dad. I was just Tina for a long time. Like, and I think she knew I was her mother, but she didn't know. And I was like, well, don't tell her, because I was trying to protect her feelings and, her development, because I was still in and out and I still wasn't where I needed to be to support her and to protect her at that moment. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've technically only lived with my daughter and been like a full-time parent for like 2 years. I got her back when she was like 12 or 13.
Yeah.
What is she, 14? Yeah, 12.
Well,
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't mean.
No. Go on. 12. So it's very different now that I'm trying to protect a 14-year-old rather than I miss the beginning stages of protection, I guess. I missed that. Like the protection when you kind of like invest in them how you want them to be raised and their values and their beliefs and things like that. Like those aren't my values and beliefs and morals in my child. There's some great ones in there, but they didn't come from me. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm grateful probably that they didn't, because they probably would have been some jacked up morals, values, and beliefs, because the lifestyle we was living was treacherous and heinous. So, you know what I'm saying? Sometimes things work out for the better, even if it wasn't what you expected it to be. So I think for me, that was some great protection, is that I had a village who could do the right thing when I wasn't in the capacity to do the right thing.
And I appreciate you saying that, because I think, again, like I said, me and your experiences are so different. But I went through a large, like, I can't even begin to express
Yeah.
the PPD that I went through. And I know a lot of things were triggered for me, specifically about my abuse, because I was being re-triggered by the things that were happening. Because some of them were sexual in nature. So I really appreciate the whole conversation, specifically when we talk about like protective factors, about like having that village, right? Because I feel like there are a lot of people that, you know, even may not be in my life today, that I really have to hold to high regard, to being like, thank you for your service and what you've helped me and my son through. You know what I mean? I think for me, it was also the fact that, like, an understanding that, like I said, seeing the understanding that there were a lot of fears and a lot of things before I had my baby. Then I had my baby. And having to understand that, like you said, the community, but also like understanding my intentionality. Like, it's a protective instinct and it's a protective factor, you know, that I want to give him the best. You know, I want to provide him and keep him around everything that's good. You know what I mean? And so I just, I also think that it's a true thing that we don't talk about, is the fears of, like, you know, I'm not gonna lie to y'all, and it's not even specific to men. I don't feel necessarily, if I don't know you like that, like I could leave my kid in the room with you for 5 seconds. You know what I mean? Like if I go to the bathroom or something, I'm so scared that somebody's gonna like flash him or something, right? Like some crazy stuff, right? Like, because we live in a crazy world. I am, you know, I seen an article recently that had a lot of effect on me. It was about a toddler and being sexually abused in a mall by a guy that ran a kiosk, and like basically these single mothers that had no help and they needed jobs and they needed to work, and they worked at the mall, and they would leave their kid with this guy at the kiosk. And basically, long story short, like I think it was like another country that like alerted U.S. authorities that this happened, and I really had a visceral reaction, because I found myself that, like, even when raising my child, like I will go to lengths above and beyond to protect him. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't see myself leaving my son with somebody that I didn't know at a mall kiosk. But I say all that to say that we all come from different positions, and we all are subjected and open to certain circumstances. And so it just made me realize that, like, those protective instincts, I want people to understand that they're normalized. Like, you know what I mean? Like for you to feel like, no, over my dead body, or that, like, you know.
But some people are not going to have those protective instincts. They grow over time. Like,
And that's
let's be
why
real.
I love the duality of the
Because
conversation.
I did not have that. I didn't have
Right.
protective instincts for my kid. Even after I gave birth to her, I had no connection. And part of that is because I wasn't a person when I grew up and said, "Ooh, I want to have kids when I grow up." And I never wanted to have kids because my childhood growing up was fucked up. So I didn't want to have no kids because I didn't want my kids to go through what I did not have: lack of a father, a teenage mother, just a whole bunch of just stuff. You know what I'm saying? Being in the life, being exploited, just stuff, abused, a lot of stuff. And I didn't want to have a child. So then when you have somebody, then you're forced to have a child and you're forced to be somebody's parent. That's a totally different aspect. So that connection of trying to have a motherly instinct, it took a long time to get. And I'm gonna be honest, even to this day, I don't have a motherly instinct with my child. I'm her mother and I love her, but a motherly instinct, no, I don't have it. I'm trying. Like, my daughter had to tell me your love language is a little off. And I was like, oh, okay, well, let me try to change that, right? Because I'm real, just very hardcore. I'm not a hugger. I'm not an emotional type of person. And so I don't want people to think like a protective instinct is, this, that, and the third. Like, no, a protective, I think is whatever your capacity is in that moment and where you are at in your life. Because I want to say from when I had her compared to now, my protective instincts are different. And I think like they change and they evolve as I do the work on myself and I evolve. Because as I went to therapy and as I was allowed to do the work and go to all these different trainings and learn about trauma and secondary trauma, then it turned my perspective, not just on my relationship with my kid, but even my relationship with my parents. And like, damn, now I'm able to understand their traumas and now how that affected me as a child growing up and why I was vulnerable and why these things happened. And so then you're able to put the connections together and then say, okay, well, now let's do this different. Because I don't think that if people have the capacity to understand their trauma or what they've been through, then how can they, and I'm not saying they can't, but it's going to be difficult for them to process and to be there to protect their own children, to be honest, because now you're putting your traumas into your child. And that's one thing that as an adult in my 38 plus years old is that I don't want to project my own insecurities and energies on my child or on my family, because I've done that. I remember my mom sent me a video of like my daughter in the bathtub with my stepdad, and I'm like, why is he bathing her? That's nasty. He's not her dad. He shouldn't be in the tub with her, like blah blah blah. And I'm like, but my mom was there, and I'm like on FaceTime, and she was doing something in the bath, and it wasn't inappropriate, but my mind clicked it to be an inappropriate thing. And so I think that if you don't have like the proper resources to really understand your trauma and the depths of where it comes from, then you can put that energy onto your kid, and then now they can be walking around and talking about how they're depressed and they have all this, then they'll end up with your secondary trauma, and that's not good.
Yeah, and I that's honestly what I love about the duality of this conversation is that we've had different experiences, and that it also lets you all know, like, even though we've had, different experiences, like all of us, right? Like all of us who've had different child sexual abuse experiences, and they all differ in the way that they happen, when they happen, the capacity when they happen, right? That the experience has been different, and that's part of the transparency of this conversation. And I just want to like really end, because something that you said is so vital in the conversation moving forward that we're about to have next, specifically about the fact that you chose, because you weren't there, you didn't, that wasn't your capacity at the time, you chose to put a village in place. And it really speaks to our next conversation, specifically about breaking the cycle, right? Because it wasn't, maybe certain things weren't there for you, but you have put things in place, and even breaking the cycle in intergenerationally, coming back into your child's life in certain ways. You know what I mean? So I love that. So I don't want to be like remiss to not acknowledge that. So
Okay.
my commitment has always been to a new way of parenting, one void of abuse and trauma for my kids. And I'm determined daily to make that a reality. I feel like for myself and a lot of other people, that is the truth. That is like what we live, because what we've been through. We are here. We're like, rah, rah. You're not going to like mess with my child. Ain't nothing going to happen to my babies. Like mama bear or papa bear, whichever, you know, or whatever your pronoun would be. So it's like, you know, I feel like, and you know, Kristina, think about it. What's the number one thing that people be saying that because you've had the experience? And it's some BS. What am I talking about? Just I'm gonna let you just finish that. What's the number one thing people be talking about when they're like, oh, so you're vulnerable to be what?
You vulnerable to be just like your mama or your daddy.
Or you're vulnerable to be just like the person who exploited you, right? Like, because those of us who've experienced child sexual abuse, people be like, oh, well, they might do it to someone else. Or like the you know what I mean? And that I think that it bothers me because we don't talk about that a lot, right? And specifically in these spaces, we kind of like tiptoe the elephant around it. But no, let's call that out. You know what I mean? Like, no, like there's always this misconception that those of us who, you know, have been through it, yes, there's not an exception that, you know, this population wouldn't have somebody that could possibly do it, right? But the fact that there's this idea that, you know, those of us, you know, are more susceptible to doing it is BS, because those of us that I've met, we all want to break the cycle, right? We all want to, like, you know, do the opposite. We want to protect children, and or if not, at minimum, like you said, even when your protector factors weren't kicked in, you had no malice. You didn't want to harm anybody. You know what I mean? Like you wanted to like say, hey, I'm not in capacity, so I can break the cycle, and putting other factors in place for this person.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. And then, you know, there's always all these common misconceptions that, you know, we're going to put our children in the hands of abusers. You know, like I said in the beginning, like there's this common misconception that my daughter should be trafficked. Like right now she's 14 years old, so she should be getting groomed right now by some young trafficker. And by next year, she should be out on somebody's corner getting down. Like, you know, there's all these common things that we think about, like when we're getting out the life. And then, you know, like what were we doing, you know? So breaking the cycle, like what caused us to even get involved. And so I think that is very important that we talk about like certain activities. Like when I was growing up, I had a lot of free time. My mom worked a lot. She was a young parent, so that required me to get involved in like stuff that I shouldn't have been getting involved in, talking to grown people when I shouldn't have been talking to grown men, just certain things that ultimately led to me being trafficked. And so breaking that cycle is like, I make a commitment now to where I drop my daughter off and I pick her up from school every day. My mother dropped me off, but she never had the capacity to come pick me up from school every day. I make sure that I'm at all my daughter's her recitals and performances at school. I'm part of the PTA. Even if I don't do nothing, I'm part of a PTA. I don't ever know nobody that, and part of my friends and nobody that said they part of the PTA. My mama wasn't even part of the PTA when I was going to school, and I made a commitment that I want to join the PTA. I want to be involved in some form, shape, or fashion, because to me, that's part of breaking the cycle, you know, showing her that I'm present, showing her that I want to be actively involved with what's going on in the school, and I want to be actively involved in her life. One thing that I can say that I'm very like grateful for of my village is that they got my daughter involved in sports at a young age. So like my daughter knew how to swim when she was like 2 years old. She was playing tennis by the time she learned how to walk. Like 3 or 4 years old, she was on the courts playing tennis, and she still does to this day. And so I think that there's always. Was I an athlete?
Yeah.
I played basketball in high school, but I mean, I'm not as athletic as my kid. Like that's a different level of commitment. I'm not, you know, she played karate and stuff. That's different level. I'm not, but like having the capacity to show up and to get her involved in those type of things is totally different. Because if I still had the same mindset that I did 10 or 15 years ago, you know, we wouldn't have been doing that. It would have been all based on what I'm trying to do, or even just me following a man. And I just want to make that present too, is that a lot of me getting out the life or me trying to figure myself out so that I can be a good parent was me just figuring out Kristina and stop chasing happily ever after, because I thought that when I got out the life, I had this certain amount of time where I had to find a stepdaddy for my kid and have this future stepdaddy situation, and so that she can have a family. And that was taking away time, that was taking away energy, and then it was also taken away from my value and from me investing in myself and doing the work on Kristina. Because when we get with these different individuals, sometimes we adapt their ideologies, their beliefs, we start talking like them, we start cooking certain things that they want to cook, they become the forefront, and then our children become the secondary situation in our lives. And not saying that we're meaning to put them as secondary, but it's all in this fairy tale concept of, I'm trying to have a family, I'm trying to get this family, I'm trying to give them something that they never had. And so that right there can be detrimental to your recovery, the child's recovery, and that can cause them to be re-victimized or, re-abused. And not in a sense of like a physical abuse, but in a sense of a mental abuse, because the child is now feeling like mommy is being taken away from me. Like, I already didn't have her when she was in life. Now here comes this new guy that she's trying to bring stepdaddy. And now he's taking away time and attention from my mom to where she can't fully invest in me. So I think that breaking the cycle of abuse is like also doing the work within yourself and doing the work for your child so that they can have that healthy lifestyle. And if you don't have or ever get that fairy tale happily ever after, like, that's okay too. And being okay and sitting with that, you know what I'm saying? Because I always thought like, oh, I want to have another kid and I have to do it by the time she turns 8. And so I'm searching for this man to have this kid and this relationship that never happened. And so, like, could you imagine if I put that energy into so much other shit? Like, girl, I could have put that energy in my daughter. She could be an Olympian right now. Like, you know what I'm saying? So it's just like figuring out and balancing that healthy life. Like,
Yes. And like, no, I love that. I really love that. And I completely am aligned with you. And it's like, girl, I am the chairperson of the PTA. I just was a football coach. I ain't know nothing about football. Girl,
yeah.
I be trying. I'm trying to figure this out, right? So I'm trying to break the cycle, but I'm also, you know what I mean? I don't know. I'm trying to get it right. I think that it's also not even just about those type of things, right? Too, is I think we don't also call out the fact that, like, what I'm trying to stop doing is I don't want my child to end up in therapy based on the things that I react to because I'm a person of trauma, right?
Yeah.
So I'm always like, like super hyper vigilant, like cover yourself, pull up your pants, or like when I hear loud noise and reacting, and then my kid reacting too, like, oh, or like because I'm a little scared of the dark because of the things that happen to me in the dark, and then now I hear my little 3-year-old talking about, oh, I'm scared of the dark, and I'm like, no, you're not. You're my brave boy. But why? It's because he hears me. And so, like, also trying to remember that it's those subtle things about breaking the cycle too that I have to remember, not just like those big concepts. So, that as well. I'm trying to be mindful of time because I see we're getting close to. So you as a parent are responsible for setting healthy boundaries where your children can be heard and encouraged to develop self-awareness, patience, empathy, and more. I can't agree with this enough. I love this because even as you shared that we had a difference in our experiences, you made sure that she had people that were around her that instilled those things, and that you still to this day have that opportunity. And I think for me as well, I think I'm like in that place. I seen a quote recently that was like, having a kid is like, the universe giving you a star and telling you to keep it shining. And I was like, dang, that's so crazy. So, as we talk about that, I think it's also a lot for us to talk about like navigating boundaries specifically. Like, I know for me, I'm just going to say, like, as a survivor of child sexual abuse, one of the biggest things for me is that I don't know if some of you have heard the term touched out, like specifically the touched out, like with my baby, and he's 3, right? So lots of like neediness and a lot of cleanliness and lots of touching. And he was a breastfed baby until 2 years, right? So that we don't talk about that, right? Like how feeling like for me, I didn't feel like my body was my own, yo. Like I felt like, and it brought so much trauma back for me, yo. It brought like, It was just a lot. So for me now, when he's 3 and he's not breastfeeding no more, being able to say, no, this is my body, right? And being very clear. And like we talk about it in the movement and how like penis and vagina are bad words, right? I want him to be able to clearly distinguish these things. And I'm very hyper vigilant about it because I was sexually abused, right? So I want him to not like tell me, oh, somebody, touched my like ding dong, because you go to court, somebody be like ding dong is a hostess product, right? No, I want them to be clear,
Well,
So
why is penis and vagina a bad word?
no. I'm saying penis and vagina aren't bad words.
No,
But
and they should be talked about amongst our kids, right? Like what education they should know firsthand from the source.
well, I think it's I say all
I
that to
mean,
say
not
is
at
that,
3, but I mean,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's levels.
Right? So I say all that to say, for me, it's been a lot for me to navigate boundaries specifically with my baby, and I know we have two different like experiences, right? You have a teenager, I have a little one. And for me, a lot of it has been like when my body is touched out, how do I navigate that? How do I go across like talking to my baby and like setting those boundaries? So like we have learned like this screen right here is like one of my like safe bubbles, right? So he knows that this is up, mommy needs a safe bubble. And this actually works when I'm like heightened or I'm like viscerally triggered for me. So I've been trying to navigate boundaries because he is still young, he's still very vulnerable, and things like that. So it's been a lot for me. And I have been fearful that when I tell him like, no, mommy, because there's been times he's like, I want a hug, right? Because kids will be like, mess up, and you're like getting on them, and they're like, no, I want a hug. And I've also been trying to figure out like, no, I want you to understand that I love you and have a boundary of that. Without like falsely representing that every time you mess up I want to give you a hug, because then it's gonna set you up bad later, right? So just trying to navigate that boundary for him. I don't know if you want to share any experiences about that. Dang, we're like going out of time. I'm like, we
Yes.
still have topics.
Okay, so I'll make it quick. So I think now that as a teenager, having boundaries is very important, and having these conversations about sexuality and your body and things like that, because she's in developmental stages and she's going to be going to high school this year. So we need to have these conversations. So I have had the conversations about the upper equator, the lower equator, and where you should be touched and how you should be feeling. And if somebody makes you uncomfortable, then we need to say something and speak out. Don't forever hold your peace type situation. And I'm your trusted adult, or identifying who in the family is a trusted adult. So if you don't feel comfortable telling me, then you need to identify this person and go let them know, because we don't need to let anything go unheard. But I also have a really clear relationship with my 14-year-old to where like, hey, I only have 4 years left and I have to like give you all this information so that you can be the best adult that you can be. So if this is coming off a little harsh and like, harsh, it's not because I want it to be. It's just mama got to keep it real because we like short on time. But I love you. And so like I said before, I did have a problem with like physical touch. I didn't want to kiss my daughter because I felt my mouth was dirty and nasty and I don't want to like give her germs. It was just like my own phobias and things like that. And I still kind of feel that way. And even as far as like hugs and things like that, like, because that sensor is turned off when we're in the life as far as like being intimate and things like that. And so I had to kind of warm up to it. But now that I didn't warm into it, now my daughter's 14, she don't want that. You know what I'm saying? So now I'm heartbroken because I want all the hugs and you know what I'm saying, to be all up on her, and she doesn't want that for me. So now I have to respect her space. And so now that is a transition of my daughter being like, mom, I make her uncomfortable. Don't look, don't do this. And me being like, okay, but still like having to let her know, like, I'm still the parent. Like my daughter's at a stage, she can go to the doctor and they have their one-on-one time and I have to sit outside. And like, that's really weird. But then in a sense, that's kind of independent. And I'm like, well, I'm glad she's using her voice and feel comfortable where she can be in the doctor's office with her doctor and say what's going on without me being there. And so cheering her on and letting her know like when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate and who to connect to, I think is very important, in having those conversations. And also letting my daughter know that home is your safe space, because the world is going to judge you a lot. They're going to judge you probably by your hair, your clothes, your identity, your sexuality, all these things. But know that here in this house where I'm at, I'm not going to judge you because I'm your mama. I'm here to protect you. And this is always going to be a safe space for you. And the one thing, if I don't know it, then I need to find the resources to give it to you so that you can have everything you need to be, the most together person that you can be in that season of your life. And I feel like that is my responsibility of setting up those healthy boundaries and being there to protect her and to support her, but also letting her know that I'm your mother, I'm not your friend, and this is my job to raise you accordingly so that you can be a law-abiding citizen when you turn 18 years old.
Amen. I love that. I love that. And that's just beautiful. So vulnerability helps us more easily receive feedback and see that we all have a role to play in making one another our best selves. That really leads us into the conversation specifically about honoring vulnerability. I know we're running short on time. Did you have a few thoughts about this?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, just it's okay to be vulnerable with your child, you know what I'm saying, to be vulnerable with yourself. We have to have courage to accept some of the things that have happened to us, and to take accountability to do the work. And when I say do the work, that means going to therapy and getting yourself healed in whatever capacity that may be, so that when you confront your traumas and things like that, you can come back to your child and be a nurturing and supporting and protective parent that you can be. So, it's okay to be vulnerable, but just be vulnerable with the right person or the right people or your right village.
Yeah, and I love that because I think for me, and I'm gonna try to make it quick too, but I've had to honor the vulnerability, even though my son is 3. That because of the experiences that I've had. I'm sorry, y'all, but because of the experiences that I've had, I don't always feel like the best mother, right? And I don't always react the way that I feel like I should.
Aww.
So, especially because he's so young. I am so sorry. I gave y'all a trigger warning. So,
it's all right. You're gonna learn.
Again, we're all trying to do our best, right? So,
ain't no book in this parenting. You learning every day. Ain't no book in this parenting.
Technically, there's a million books, but they don't really say that you know
what I mean? Parenting.
Not when it comes to this conversation, and those of us who've had child sexual abuse experiences. It's just like, so I've had to be understanding and honoring my vulnerability, like you said, like just in my capacity, right? Sometimes I'll be like, mommy can't do it right now, right? Or mommy doesn't have it right now, or give mommy a second, right? And he's really good because now when I ask him, he'll be like, give me a second, mommy, give me a second. It's hilarious. Feedback to you, right? But also the fact that there's been I'll admit that there's been a time that I've had like a major blow up on my son because I was triggered because I found out that something about my abuser's release, and a really hard morning that morning with him. And I ended up finding myself going back at lunch to apologize to him and being vulnerable in the apology. And people were like, well, you went and he's 3. He's not going to remember that. Yeah, it doesn't matter. But I honor the fact that he's deserving of it. I'm comfortable in the fact that like I'm not perfect. My imperfections are real. So yeah, like it's just a real thing. I want to say that, to be vulnerable with your children, I think is a blessing, because I hope the one thing that my son sees and honors and loves about me is that my opportunity to be transparent and true. And I hope that that's what's differentiated. So I'm going to just go on to the next topic for time and space. So as a mother, I saw the trust and joy on my child's face when they cuddled in between the embracing arms of their parents, Rachel Rainbolt. Oops, sorry, went too far. Sorry, I don't know what happened. I think my thing is I think it went out of order. It's okay. Oh gosh. All right. Well, the last topic we really wanted to talk about is like finding healing and growth. And I want to just, before we hear some of the final thoughts from Kristina, I just wanted to say that I do see the notes in the chat, and I'm so sorry that we haven't been as interactive with that. But I agree, Briggs, that all kids are going to need and will benefit from therapy, no matter how hard of us work. And I am learning to be gracious with myself, and I think that's the conversation that we're here to have, to encourage you all and with ourselves, right? And that, you know, we are really trying to be intentional about those things, right? Of making sure kids know those body parts and things like that. And I really appreciate you guys for having that and bringing that to the forefront. And just specifically the conversation, finding growth and healing. I'm really trying to give those things, like you said, with your child, like how you had the opportunity to give her something that you didn't have, specifically with her being in athletics and things like that. I think for me too, I want my child to understand, like, you know, somatic healings in a way that I never got to do, right? So I take my child to like sound baths, and I do things like take them to like mind, body, and healing conference. So we do light therapies, and you know, I try to do a lot of like somatic and growing things with him. So as I'm learning these for my own healing and myself, I like incorporate them with my son, right? Like I've done yoga with my son. And again, this is not saying that like everybody needs to go do that, right? Some people might need to go on a hike. Some people just might need to kick it with the homies. Like you don't know what people's growth and healing looks like, but it's just like the fact that being able to share that in relation to my child.
Right. And so I think also, you know, finding healing and growth, I think it all comes within. I think that for me, it's all been a journey from, you know, when I had her to getting her back to living. Like we have stages, and in each stage, I'm learning something out of that stage. And I think the first thing that I had to do was like forgive myself for whatever that I lack in my parenting or that I did not give her in the beginning stages. I had to come to terms and grips with that part first. And then secondly, that opened up the window of opportunity to where now I can meet her where we're at today and give her the best of what I have to offer in this moment. You know, and to me, I think that is what's important. And also like letting my kid understand and know like this is what your mother went through. So if I say that you're triggering me or I'm triggered is because of X, Y, and Z. And I think that, you know, I'm dealing with a teenager, so it's a lot more conversations that we can have about relationships, about how I got exploited, why was I doing these things, and I can kind of educate her and break it down in a way where she understands. Compared to when she was 4, we really couldn't have those conversations, but when she was 4, I was still trying to figure myself out. I was still hurt. I still had a lot of healing to do. I still was, you know, triggered. Like I still had thoughts of like going back to the life. And I'm not gonna lie, I still was engaging with my trafficker. Like I still was talking to her daddy sometimes. People was telling me like put him you know, put a restraining order on him or do all these criminal things so you can get victims of crime money and all these other things. And it's like at the end of the day, no one knows what it's like to have a trafficker as a baby daddy, and that's somebody that your child is going to have to deal with for the rest of their life until they're grown. And so you're thinking about the right now of me putting a restraining order or me filing paperwork on him, but I'm thinking about the years from now when my daughter is 40 and she's talking to her daddy and her kids going to see their grandfather, whatever that relationship may be at that moment. And those are the things that I think people don't actually think about. And so when you come to terms of healing, it's like I got to heal myself so then I could be there to help grow and heal this child. So then when the baby daddy trafficker come back into our lives, we'll have the mental capacity and the tools to be able to handle that accordingly and whatever that looks like. And ultimately just give a situation because we're learning. You know what I'm saying? And if my child can give me grace and love me every day, then I need to be able to return that tenfold and do the work to be the best parent that I can be in each cycle of my life, and doing the work with healing, whatever that may be, whether it's, you know, therapy, horse therapy, magic mountain therapy, you know, hiking therapy, whatever that therapy looks like in that season, just continuously just doing it and not giving up. Ultimately, it's just is what it is.
And I really appreciate that, because like you said, you know, even for those of us who, you know, didn't, like I said, I, you know, you had your own experience, and we definitely, girl,
Yeah.
with having that experience of the person who gave you the abuse, you know, having a child with them, and then, you know, my experience, and the differences, but so much of the commonalities, right? So many of the ways that we have comprehension and understanding, right? So I just want to be mindful and say thank you all for joining us here today. I will not be remiss to be transparent that I had missed the last slide, and so forgive me for that one. But we really appreciate you. We hope that this has been an informative, or at least a brain sparking, you know, thought provoking conversation. Something that you guys feel that you can take back, and it'll be vital for you and your healing. So thank you so much for having us here today.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you both so much. I appreciate it. I'm going to stop the recording.